Okay, I'm going to do a pretty quick overview of using the Red Giant generator plugin to create your seamless loop very easily. We'll look at some more techniques next week, and we'll actually use real video next week rather than the plugins, and we'll solve making loops out of actual video next week. But for now, this week, let's go to our LED wide 1920 1080 and create a new solid. And on that solid, we will add one instance of Red Giant Universe generator uni.fractal background. So this is universe fractal background. Red Giant Universe needs to be installed. And it replaces the color of the solid with the colors, let's go there, of the plugin. The plugin has like three colors. We can think of them as shadow, mids, and highs, and that's how they're being used, but they can be all dark if you want them to. That's up to you. Now, the first thing about this is the reason I'm going with this plugin is it animates right off the bat, and it is able to loop right off the bat. So I have an 8-second comp, which is how the presets are set up. But the initial loop duration on our plugin is 5 seconds. So it's looping here, and when it gets to the 8-second mark, you got a glitch. So let's fix that. Set this to 8, and now we will re-render this whole thing, and it will have a seamless loop because now it's going to loop at the 8-second point right as the comp is ending. And it's seamless. Okay. Now the next thing I'm noticing is this is washing out a bit here. At one point, it's getting very bright, and I don't like that value going into that washed out look. You might think it looks cool, but let me get to that point right here. My highlight color is washing into white or washing a little too bright for me. I think it's okay, but not really an issue. I'm just using it as an example to show you that we have brightness and contrast in the plugin, and they work differently with the different fractals that we're going to use. So I'll show you in this one. If I increase the contrast, it's increasing the brightness as well. If I increase the brightness, my bright area is getting massively larger. If I bring it down, I'm finally getting it contained to where it doesn't look like it's expanding out and blowing out. I don't want to get that extra white edge there. It's just me in this particular plugin. So I wanted to stay as a gradient like that. So you're going to be playing with brightness and contrast constantly in these plugins. And now let me tell you why. I just corrected it. So let's play our 8-second loop. And now I'm getting up to my highlight color, but it's not blossoming out because I don't want it to be too distracting. It's a background. And now it's good, and I've got it looping. So let's say I'm happy with that. But then I'm like, you know what? I'm going to use one of these other fractals, and I'm going to change the math that creates the shapes and the gradients and the blends. That's what this is basically doing. And when I got a ridged, it's a lot darker, and I'm not really even getting to my highlight color. So I might want to take brightness when I got a ridged and ramp it up a little bit more. See, now I cranked it up, and I'm not even getting this as bright as the other fractal. So you want to play with that, and contrast 2 is going to change kind of how hard edged it is or how much gradation it has. The less contrast, the more it blends. So, and it goes up to a value of 8. And then you can also get these really cool lines with the higher contrast. So let's bring this back down to like 2. Okay, and let's change again to the third fractal, which is Perlin. And once again, it's even darker. So let's bring up brightness. How high did brightness go? Well, there it gets into blowing out. Let's bring it down into the range I like. And let's play with contrast again. Harder edges, all the way up to 8. Or down to 1. So that's going to change from fractal to fractal. Let's go to cellular. And once again, that one's in pretty good shape. Let's look at warp is very cool. Let's look at warp. And let's look at IQ. So IQ, I might need to bring that brightness back down a bit. So as you change your algorithm, reset your brightness to make it more usable. Now, this one looks pretty flat, but let's play with scale. We haven't really scaled yet, so let me, as I increase the scale, it's like we're zooming out. It's like we're getting farther away from the surface of the fractal, if you want to think of it that way. So you might want to zoom out and then replay with your brightness and contrast to see what you got, see what this weird math thing is doing, you know. So just play with those parameters at first until you decide what you want to do. I'm going to go with warp today, and I am going to bring my brightness back up a bit more. Bring my scale way back down. Bring it down to 1, see what we got. Whoa. So I'm noticing that there's a relationship between scale and animation speed. So let's go to animation speeds at 2. Let's take it down to 1. It's not really going to slow it down all that much. At 0 scale, this thing's going ballistic. So let me go to 2 scale. And it's slowing down a bit, but you know, if I'm zoomed way in on it, it's like I'm closer to the surface and things are moving faster. So that's sort of the relationship between scale and animation speed. And I brought animation speed down to 1, but I think it goes down to lower than 1. Let's type in 0.1. And it is working. So I got really subtle slow movement down here at 0.1. So if you grab onto a slider and just crank it back and forth, you will find the extremes. Okay, that's what I always do. And if you see a dot, a point mark, you know that it goes into tenths of a value, so you know you can take it down to 0.1 underneath 1. And always take things to 0. Sometimes 0 breaks some of these Red Giant plugins, like it's no longer animating. Makes sense. But you know, go check the extremes and see what they do. I'm liking that. Now I'm going to do something to put it more into context with the project. I'm going to go to our I'm going to go to my logo and bring it onto the screen. And so the logo is in the foreground, background is in the background layer. I'm going to go back to my background layer, back to my effects controls, and I'm going to go down to these colors, and I am going to click on the mid color, and I am going to do this differently. It's not grabbing, is it grabbing the value? It's not grabbing the value. So I'm going to have to do this a little bit differently. I'm going to move this over. I've got my logo over here, and I'm going to click on that dropper, and I'm going to bring my eyedropper over this other file, and I'm going to hit the enter key, and that got my value. I'm going to do the same thing to the highlight color. I'm going to make it the orange. So, oops, I meant to hit the eyedropper. Let's put it here. Hit enter. And now my highlights are orange. Or do I want to make them that pink? There, it's the pink. So let's make them the pink. And once I've got the color, I can come in and adjust it. And I'm changing the hue now, so I shouldn't have done that. Let's go with the orange. I want to keep it exactly in my logo universe. Eyedrop, eyedrop, and enter key. 7th time's a charm. There it is. And there are the colors. Okay, so back to it. So now my fractal is using the colors of my logo. I might want to alter the green, so let me click on the green, and I don't want to change, I can change saturation. I don't want to change hue because then I'm not in my green anymore, but I might change my brightness. So you actually change the brightness value, and can't really change the brightness value on this one. So where do we go to get more orange? We go back to brightness and contrast. See, brightness is going to create more of color 3, I believe. And contrast is going to change the sharpness of the edge and or accentuate the blurriness of it. So I can actually clean up that gradient space in between the colors by playing with the contrast. So I'm going to go with that and say I'm happy with that for today. Complexity is like having extra layers. So instead of doing another instance of this whole plugin to make more of it, all I have to do is come in here and increase my complexity. So complexity level 2 adds a second iteration of the fractal onto itself. And you can see that the texture is getting a little bit more complicated. Let's go up to 3. Watch this empty area over here. As I plug it in, you see more stuff showing up. Let's go to, let's take it up to 6. And so you see there's a lot more going on. And every time it adds another layer, it's changing the scale of that fractal. So we're getting more instances of it at different sizes, which is making it vastly more complex. And I think it goes up to 8, or it goes up to 10. Now 10 will actually take more computation power to render, but we're doing short 8-second things. So if this was applied to a much longer duration, it would affect render time. It is affecting render time. This is 10 times more render time probably than 1. I think if you want to get the most out of it, pick a value 2 or 3, and you'll get that extra texture without too much extra memory. Just go with what you think works. So this is what the warp texture is looking like, but what happens if I don't want it to be so abstract? What if I want to actually make it less graphical? I've got blurs, I've got animations, I've got animation speed, but I've got scroll speeds, and I've got blurs. So let me blur it horizontally a bit. Okay. Now I can take that extreme to 100 and just turn it almost into a blurry noise, which is nice. It's got a cool vibe to it. If I want a little bit more of the texture back, I bring that blur down. There's a certain place where it's still a shape. There's a certain point where the blur starts to take over and becomes lines. That's kind of nice. What would happen if I took that and then I also scrolled it on X? So that's an interesting look and feel. That's at 100% scroll. What if I brought it down to something more subtle? So there's a lot to play with in these plugins. Go explore it. Have fun with it. And we'll do more next week. But get something ready for Friday to have your logo and an animated seamless loop background for Friday's discussion. We don't have lecture on Friday, so just post and give each other feedback, and I'll check in as well. Next lecture is Tuesday. We'll get into it there, and we'll do looping backgrounds with video and keep moving forward with the project. All right, I'll see you then.